نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakumullah khair. At least one brother gave me the salam back. The rest of you, mashallah, ready to go to sleep. Sorry, you as well. Okay. Some of the time we find ourselves, or we think we are victims of our destiny, or we are sort of in a trap. We're in a autopilot, and we have to do what we have to do. I haven't narrated any stories to you yet, so let me give you a once upon a time. So once upon a time, there was this chap, lived around far in the sort of Caucasus, the sort of Samarkand type area. And he was a bit of a magician, not magician rather, he was a musician. He used to play one of those kind of stringed instruments, I don't know what they're called. And he was traveling one day, and as he was traveling from one destination to another, he was strumming his little instrument, reflecting on life. And it started to rain, and the rain became quite heavy. So he realized that he's going to have to decide to take shelter somewhere, otherwise he's going to be drenched and feel very uncomfortable. So as he's strumming along and riding his camel, most likely, he saw this sort of dilapidated house in the corner, and he thought, what I'll do is I'll rest there, and I'll wait for this storm or whatever it was, monsoon, to pass, and then I will carry on. So whilst he was sat, leaning against the wall, strumming his little instrument, playing his little tune, thinking of some new tunes for the next place he was going to present, he sort of reflected on his life, because many of the time we don't get the chance to reflect on life. We sort of go on autopilot, school, college, whatever, Sometimes we don't get till our 40s before we think, hold on a second here, where have I got to? Is this what I wanted to be, when I was a kid, or, is this the direction I wanted my life to go in? And he had one of those kind of moments. And as he was sat there, sort of strumming his instrument, he thought, what have I become? I'm a musician, for crying out loud. I sort of divert people's attention from the remembrance of Allah. And I bring their attention towards me. I bring their attention towards futility. I bring their attention away from like a short hit. Instead, I should be getting people to remember Allah. But then I thought, who am I? I'm a musician, for crying out loud. What kind of a wacky ideas am I having? What kind of stupid pie in the sky fairy tale ideas I'm having? So he sort of knocked himself down, like we do as well. We always think, what you're going to do, learn some deen. What are you going to learn deen for? Look at you. 5 years ago you were doing this. 3 years ago you were doing that. You've just about kept the beard. Well, let me stay within my lane. So he had that kind of moment, and he brought himself down a few pegs and sort of thought that, and I'm just sort of fooling myself. But after a while he put his musical instrument to one side and he sat, and he was quite enjoying the little... Sorry, sound effects aren't working, mouth's a bit dry. But you get the idea. Drip, drip, drip sound you could hear coming from the corner of the dilapidated room that he was in, with the roof with holes in it. Even though there was water coming from elsewhere, but it was the water coming in that corner which drew his attention. And when you've got nothing better to do, obviously nowadays we'll pick our phone up and spend hours on our phone if we have to wait somewhere. That kind of noise just drew his attention, and he just started to look at it. And as he looked in the corner, what he saw was a small, tiny puddle forming, as these little drips were dripping down. And he just kind of, like sometimes he has that kind of like calming influence, when you hear water trickle. And he was having that kind of calming moment. And it made him kind of forget about everything. Forget about who he was. Forget where he was going. Forget where he was in life. He did not allow for that moment his history to judge him. He did not allow the history to control his destiny. He did not allow his past to dictate his future for that moment. And he sat back. Drip, drip, drip. It's amazing how your mouth dries so quickly after Fajr. I don't know how Qarisa feels. So He's listening, he's watching these drips, and the puddle's getting slightly bigger, and slightly bigger, and slightly bigger. And after some time he thinks, when that water is nearing his feet, he says, that's amazing, is that? I've been sat here, obviously he didn't know the amount of time, he didn't have a watch, obviously. Back in the day they didn't have watches. And he's thinking, I've been sat here for a short while, and I've seen a drip become literally fill half the room with water. You know, if I went and studied one thing at a time, learn one little thing a day, maybe I might possess something or something. Maybe I might learn something. So at that moment in time, he grabbed his stringed instrument, just before he broke it, he tweaked it a few more times just to get it out of the system, you know. Once he'd got it out of the system, he smashed it, got on his camel and set off in the direction he was going in. When he arrived at the city, he asked around for the Aimma of that city. This man was in his late 30s, early 40s. It's a true story, but unfortunately I forget the name of the sheikh. So he asked around, found out the Aimma that resided in this area, and started to study. Within the space of, I think, around 15 years or so, he became the greatest, or one of the greatest imams of that area. Sometimes we allow our history to predict our future or to control our future. And whatever situation we find ourselves in, we allow that to cage us and restrict us. When in reality, tomorrow is what you decide it to be. Obviously, taqdeer is taqdeer, we're not denying that. But your harkat, your movement, your engagement is what will decide that. And it's only short, small masail. We know also from the great Abdullah ibn Masud and Abdullah ibn Abbas and all the great Abdullahs as they were referred to. Now if you look at the age that they had compared to the Sahaba, the Abu Bakrs, the Umars, the Osmans, there was a huge age difference. Huge age difference. You're talking about boys and men. But that did not perturb or disturb these young boys going and studying deen. They did not say, who's going to come and ask a mas'ala from me when they're saying Abu Bakr there? Who's going to come and ask a mas'ala from me when they're saying Umar there? Who's going to, they're going to say, oh, shall I ask Abdullah, 12-year-old, or shall I go ask Sayyid Umar? But that did not perturb them. That did not disturb them until those Sahaba are regarded as the elite ulama from the Sahaba. The elite. So again, we don't allow our circumstances to constrain and control us. What we do is be that drip. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to do with us is His business. If He wants us to suddenly have the capacity or the capability to be able to be a means or a medium for other people's hidayah, or if He decides that we become the means for knowledge to reach others, at the end of the day, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. We are just vehicles. We are just means for that to spread. It's His ilm. Unfortunately, we may claim it as ours, but it's not ours. It is Allah's. And all we are, if we're fortunate enough, we become the means. We become the asbab, the flow, the way that knowledge reaches others. So, learning ilm or gaining knowledge starts with sincerity. With sincerity, but before sincerity has to come that moment of reflection. The drip moment, where a person has to sit back, and i'tikaf has been established for that. Ramadan has been established for that. To reflect. To get away from the busy lifestyle. The house, the job, the friends, the social life, whatever it is that we're busy with 11 months of the year. To then take that time out and reflect and see, where am I going? Is this where I want to be? How do I move in the direction I want to move into? And then we shouldn't think, unfortunately, we have a bad habit of putting a mountain in front of a person instead of saying, take one step. So we'll say, oh, you have to study 7 years to become an alim, and then if you want to do takhassus, you have to go study another 2 years, 3 years, and then if you want to do this, another 2, 3 years. So you've got this, 14-year-old, 15-year-old looking at you and saying, wait a minute, you're telling me I have to study for 15 years. And I'll be 30 years old by then. Similarly, when we, in our 20s or 30s or 40s, we say, oh, if you want to become an alim, you have to study that. But we don't need to become an alim. What we need to do is gain ilm. Okay, there's two different things here. One is that kind of criteria which is required in order to lead us in prayer. One is that criteria which is required in order to be able to respond to istifta, to fatawa. So that's a kind of a role in society. That doesn't mean we have to have a career change. That I want to become a doctor, or I want to become a this, or I want to become a that, or I have to become a scholar. No. That's for those who want to specialize and become scholars. That's a different rule. But we all need ilm. We all need to seek knowledge. So there's two different things. We sometimes conflate the two. And we think that, I have to become a scholar. No one is saying anybody has to become a scholar. It's for one's own benefit. It's to benefit the individual first. When the imam who was strumming his instrument, he wasn't thinking, because he was quite the opposite. He had fame. He was a famous man. He already had the fame. Why would he go seek knowledge in order to get fame? He had fame. There were people around him. People respected him. People used to come to wherever there were concerts in those days. He had all of that. What he wanted to do was think, is this where I wanted to be as a 30-odd-year-old, what my life would be? And he realized, no, this is not what I wanted to be. I want to be in that direction. But it seemed too much of a task to change. It seemed too difficult. But it was only that drip moment that he had, which allowed him to put everything into context. So sincerity is first. Without sincerity, then, I give the example of a cup when I speak to my students. If you place the cup upside down and you have a torrential downpour, and you lift the cup up and you put your finger on the inside, it will be dry as a bone. But if you put the cup the other way around, and even if there was a fog, no rain, even if there was mist or a fog, and you put your finger on the inside of the cup, it will be wet. So with sincerity, our tawajjuh, our focus is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think of the rain. So even if something of His rahmah comes, even if anything comes from Him, we will gain that. But if our tawajjuh, our sincerity is wrong, if we are not actually sincere in what we're trying to do, then the cup is upside down. Now you can have, you could have a flood. This cup is still going to be dry. So sincerity is first. Once we have sincerity, then it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's going to make the wheels turn. We can't do anything. As the Mujahideen used to go into battle, they would say that the battle is ours, but success is Allah's. We're not the ones who will become victorious. It is Allah's victory. We're just the means. So in the same way, this is Allah's ilm. It's not the person's ilm. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, up until the day of judgment, His knowledge will exist on this surface of the earth. The knowledge of the Quran. That's why we are fortunate that we are the only nation that continues to memorize our revealed text. Look around, there is no other nation. We were admiring a young 10-year-old boy yesterday or today, lose track of time. And he had memorized the whole Quran. If he was to go into school, they have the Key Stage 2 books and Key Stage 1 books, which are only 30 pages. They don't expect students to memorize those pages. And then to memorize it in a language he doesn't even understand is even more so remarkable. Then we have, obviously, when we were speaking to Harun, wherever he is, when we were mentioning about the tajweed rules, then is the tafsir. That's just in the science. We can go on into the different types of sciences within the Quran. Then we have such an expertise in hadith, where we had memorizers of hadith, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of hadith memorized. And when we say hadith, we're mentioning the matan and the sanad. That is the hadith. Then we had experts of jarh wa ta'dil. which was a method of academic criticism which only exists now recently in the last century or so, when things like PhDs and masters came about in universities. And when you look at fiqh, how the fiqh has been contained, if you look in all aspects, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the means of humans, has preserved this deen in all aspects. So therefore He will continue to do so, because haqq has to always shine until the last day. Why? Because people will say, Ya Allah, you never sent a Nabi to me. You never sent anybody to me. How would I know to follow your way and not follow your way? So that will stay till the end of days. But the question is through whom will it stay? Who will be the actors? Who will be the ones who will be holding that, preserving it? We all hope that it is us. We all hope that it is us. Because the first person who preserved it, the greatest mufassir, the greatest faqih, the greatest muhaddith, if I can even use that word to him, is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is taken somewhere, and through the chains of men, his students, all until the end of days, will be dragged with him, then we hope that we will also be taken with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because we continued to keep the legacy alive. We continued to keep the knowledge alive. So, ilm, as I said, you don't have to be Allama Saab, Mufti Saab, Hazrat, whatever. These are just titles that we use. They don't mean anything. They're just titles. They're official roles that people have in society. Ilm, and who is learned, is how it impacts on your life. The knowledge that you gain and how it changes you. What do you become because of it? So step by step, drip by drip, we should all, in some way, in some fashion, be gaining knowledge. But knowledge is something which is not data. I call something knowledge and I call something data. For those of us who work in the sort of scientific fields, or even in any field, to be honest, the first thing you do is you gather data. That's not knowledge, because it's not been processed, it's not been dealt with, it's not been analyzed, you haven't reached a conclusion. So we have data, lots of data. So whether that data is asking people questions through a questionnaire, whether that data is observational, empirical, whatever the data is, we have that data. It is then when we analyze it and we deal with it, then it becomes knowledge. So in the same way, we have data inside our heads. A person could know how many salahs there are in the day. But that's just data if he doesn't pray. A person could know, how to recite the Quran, for instance, but he doesn't recite the Quran. So that's just data, it's not knowledge. So we have to be people of ilm. We have to be people who seek knowledge in order to act upon it. I think I've done my 20 minutes. On that note, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose us for the ones who preserve His deen. And may also we be chosen to spread His deen. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana. And alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.